The golden hour light transformed the landscape as they made their way back toward Montecito, taking a route that wound through residential areas Doria had discovered during her previous explorations. The day had stretched longer than any of them had planned, but no one seemed eager for it to end. Archie had arranged his collection of shells and rocks on his lap, creating what he announced was a beach museum for Lilibet to enjoy. His sister, now awake and alert in her car seat, seemed genuinely interested in his display, her dark eyes following the movement of his hands as he narrated the story of each treasure. "This one is for protection," he explained solemnly, holding up a particularly smooth gray stone. "And this one is for good dreams." He had apparently absorbed more of Doria's earlier comments about his great-great-grandmother's beliefs than anyone had realized. Harry turned in his seat to watch the interaction between his children, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Where did you learn about protection stones?" "Grandma Doria told me," Archie replied matter-of-factly. "She knows about magic things." Doria caught Megan's eye in the rearview mirror and saw her daughter's expression soften. The ability to share family traditions and stories across generations was something they had all worried might be lost in the chaos of their public lives. "What other magic things does Grandma Doria know about?" Megan asked, playing along with her son's expanding mythology. Archie considered this seriously. "She knows about cooking that makes people feel better, and she knows about breathing that makes worried go away, and she knows about hugs that work even when you're far apart." The unexpected wisdom in his simple observations brought a moment of quiet to the car. Doria had indeed taught him breathing exercises during his occasional tantrums, and her cooking had always been a source of comfort for Megan. As for the long-distance hugs, that had been their solution for the times when geography separated them, but emotional support was needed immediately. "Those are very important kinds of magic," Harry said gravely. "You're lucky to have a grandmother who knows such things." As they drove through a neighborhood of older homes set on large lots, Megan pointed out architectural details that caught her eye. "I love how each house has its own personality here. They're all different, but they work together. That's what good communities do," Doria observed. "Everyone contributes something different, but the overall effect is harmony." The comment sparked a discussion about their own sense of community in Montecito. Since the interview, they had been more isolated from their neighbors, partly by choice and partly due to increased media attention. Today's casual interactions with strangers had reminded them how much they missed those ordinary social connections. "We should have the neighbors over for dinner sometime," Megan said thoughtfully. "When things settle down a bit." "Things settle down when you decide to settle them down," Doria replied, echoing her earlier comment about creating your own calm. Waiting for permission from the outside world to live your life usually means waiting forever. Harry nodded slowly. "She's right. We've been letting other people's reactions dictate our choices for too long." The conversation was interrupted by Archie's announcement that he needed to use the bathroom right now. Doria quickly identified a small shopping center with a coffee shop that looked family-friendly, and they pulled into the parking lot. The coffee shop turned out to be one of those local institutions that survived by serving excellent drinks and treats while maintaining the kind of atmosphere that encouraged people to linger. A few customers sat at small tables, reading newspapers or working on laptops, while a barista with intricate tattoos crafted beverages with artistic precision. Harry stayed with Lilibet while Doria took Archie to the restroom, and Megan ordered drinks for everyone. The normalcy of the scene was striking. A family stopping for coffee during a day out, nobody paying them particular attention or treating them as anything other than ordinary customers. "What can I get you?" the barista asked with genuine friendliness. Megan ordered lattes for the adults and a small hot chocolate for Archie, adding cookies that looked homemade. The transaction was simple and anonymous, another reminder of how much they valued ordinary interactions. When they were all settled at a corner table, Lilibet content in her portable carrier, and Archie focused on his hot chocolate and cookie, the conversation turned to plans for the evening and the following day. "I was thinking I could cook dinner tonight," Doria offered. "With all these beautiful ingredients we picked up at the farm stand." "That sounds wonderful," Megan said, the relief evident in her voice. Since the interview, she had found it difficult to focus on domestic routines, too mentally exhausted by external pressures to take pleasure in daily activities she normally enjoyed. "What should we make?" Harry asked, genuinely interested in the menu planning. "Something simple," Doria replied. "Maybe a pasta with those heirloom tomatoes, fresh basil, and some of that cheese. And we could roast some of the vegetables as a side dish." The discussion of dinner preparations felt luxurious in its ordinariness. They debated seasonings and cooking methods with the kind of attention usually reserved for much more important decisions. But that was exactly the point, reclaiming the right to care about simple pleasures without feeling guilty about focusing on anything other than crisis management. Archie finished his cookie and began exploring the coffee shop with his eyes, taking in the artwork on the walls and the interesting shapes of the light fixtures. His natural curiosity had been somewhat suppressed during the weeks of staying close to home, but today it was reasserting itself. "Can I look at the pictures?" he asked, pointing to a display of local photography that lined one wall. Doria stood up to accompany him on his gallery tour while Harry and Meghan enjoyed a few minutes of adult conversation. The photographs showed various Santa Barbara locations through the seasons, capturing the way light and weather transformed familiar landscapes. "These are beautiful," Meghan commented, joining them at the wall. "I recognize some of these places." "This one looks like where we were today," Harry said, pointing to an image of a secluded beach that might have been their morning destination. The photographer had captured something essential about the Central Coast's particular beauty, the way the landscape seemed to exist outside of time, connected to both the Spanish colonial past and the endless future of the Pacific Ocean. Looking at the images, they all felt a renewed appreciation for their chosen home. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Archie made a new friend in the form of a small dog waiting patiently outside while its owner finished a meeting inside. The dog, a mixed breed with intelligent eyes and a gentle demeanor, seemed particularly taken with Archie's careful approach and soft voice. "What's his name?" Archie asked the owner, who had emerged to check on her pet. "Her name is Luna," the woman replied. "She loves meeting new friends." "Luna like the moon?" Archie asked, demonstrating his growing vocabulary. "Exactly like the moon," the woman confirmed. "She has silver markings that remind me of moonbeams." The brief interaction reinforced Harry and Meghan's earlier conversation about getting a family dog. Watching Archie's natural empathy with animals and seeing how the interaction brought him joy made the decision feel more urgent and positive than theoretical. Back in the car for the final stretch home, the afternoon light was beginning to shift toward evening, creating long shadows and warm golden tones that made everything look like a painting. Archie had fallen asleep again, exhausted by the day's adventures and sensory richness. Lilibet remained alert but peaceful, making soft sounds that seemed to express contentment with her expanded world. The car seat that had contained her entire universe that morning now seemed just one comfortable spot among many possibilities. "This has been exactly what we needed," Meghan said quietly, her voice carrying a peace that had been absent for weeks. "I feel like myself again." "You are yourself," Doria replied gently. "You just got disconnected from that self for a while. It happens to everyone when life gets overwhelming." Harry reached back to take Meghan's hand, squeezing it gently. "We've been so focused on reacting to everything that we forgot to just live." "Living is the best response to criticism," Doria observed. "People can say whatever they want about your choices, but they can't argue with your happiness." As they pulled into their driveway, the security team discreetly checked in, relieved to see the family return safely from their spontaneous adventure. The successful day out would likely lead to more such expeditions, a gradual expansion of their comfort zone, and reclamation of their freedom of movement. Inside the house, the day's purchases were unpacked and organized. The farm-fresh vegetables would become dinner, the flowers would brighten various rooms, and Archie's beach treasures would find special places where they could be properly displayed and appreciated. But the most important things they had brought home couldn't be unpacked or organized. The renewed sense of connection with each other, the reminder that their life in California could include simple pleasures and ordinary adventures, the understanding that happiness was still possible even in complicated circumstances. These discoveries would reshape their approach to the challenges ahead. As Doria began preparing dinner and Harry played with Archie in the garden, Megan found herself standing at the kitchen window, watching her family, and feeling grateful for the day's unexpected gifts. The interview and its aftermath had dominated their lives for weeks, but this afternoon had reminded her that their story was much larger than any single chapter. Outside, Lilibet slept peacefully in her carrier on the patio, surrounded by the scents of jasmine and lavender from the garden. The painted ladybug rock from Archie's beach collection sat nearby, a small symbol of the day's adventures and the family's resilience. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and considerations, but tonight they would share a meal made with love from ingredients chosen together, and they would sleep in a house filled with flowers picked by hand and stories created through shared experience. The simple drive that Doria had suggested that morning had accomplished something that weeks of strategic planning and crisis management had not. It had reminded them that they were not just public figures managing a complicated situation, but a family capable of creating joy and finding peace in the midst of whatever storms might come. As the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the Sussex family settled into an evening routine that felt both familiar and newly precious. They had reclaimed something essential that day, the right to be ordinary, happy, and together, regardless of what the outside world might think or say about their choices. And in that reclamation, they had found the foundation for whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead. The drive down from the overlook took them through a different route than they had climbed, following Doria's promise to show them parts of Santa Barbara they hadn't yet explored. The road wound through groves of eucalyptus trees, their distinctive scent filling the car through the open windows. Archie had fallen asleep during the descent, his head lolling against the side of his car's seat, one small hand still clutching the painted ladybug rock. Lilibet remained content in her carrier, making soft cooing sounds that seemed to blend with the rhythm of the tires on the winding road. "Where are we headed now?" Megan asked quietly, not wanting to wake her sleeping son. "There's a little farm stand I discovered a few weeks ago," Doria replied, navigating a particularly sharp curve with practiced ease. "The family has been there for 3 generations, and they grow everything organically. I thought we could pick up some fresh produce for dinner." Harry smiled at the simple domesticity of the plan. "That sounds perfect. I can't remember the last time we went grocery shopping like a normal family." The comment carried weight beyond its casual delivery. Since moving to California, and especially since the interview, their lives had become increasingly managed and protected. Security protocols meant that even simple errands required advanced planning and coordination. The spontaneous family outing felt like a small rebellion against the constraints that fame and circumstance had imposed on their daily lives. The farm stand appeared around the next bend, a collection of weathered wooden buildings clustered around a large farmhouse. Hand-painted signs advertised strawberries, avocados, fresh herbs, and farm-fresh eggs. A few cars were parked in the gravel lot, their occupants browsing the outdoor displays of produce and flowers. As they pulled into a parking space under the shade of an ancient oak tree, Doria noticed the way both Harry and Megan automatically assessed their surroundings. The habit of scanning for potential problems had become so ingrained that they probably weren't even aware they were doing it anymore. "This place looks like it hasn't changed in decades," Megan observed, and there was something wistful in her voice. "That's exactly why I love it," Doria replied. "The family told me they've been farming this land since the 1940s. The current owner grew up here, left for college, worked in the city for 20 years, then came back to take over when her parents retired. They gathered their things quietly, trying not to wake Archie. Harry decided to stay with both children while Doria and Megan explored the farm stand, a practical decision that also minimized the chance of recognition. The stand was a treasure trove of local abundance. Wooden crates overflowed with strawberries so ripe they perfumed the air, while perfectly shaped avocados promised the kind of freshness that could only come from fruit picked that morning. A refrigerated case held mason jars of farm-fresh milk and wheels of cheese made on the property. The woman behind the counter was probably in her 50s, with sun-weathered hands, and the kind of genuine smile that spoke of someone who had found her calling. She greeted Doria like an old friend. "Back again so soon?" she asked warmly. "Did your family finish that jam already? My daughter and her family are visiting." Doria explained, gesturing toward Megan, who was examining a display of heirloom tomatoes. I wanted to share some of your amazing produce with them. Megan looked up from the tomatoes and smiled. These are beautiful. Do you grow them all here? Most of them, the woman replied. The tomatoes are my specialty, though. I've been working on developing new varieties that thrive in our particular microclimate. That purple one you're holding is something I've been perfecting for 5 years. The conversation flowed naturally into a discussion of sustainable farming practices, the challenges of competing with industrial agriculture, and the satisfaction of feeding families with food grown in healthy soil. Megan found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions about organic pest management and crop rotation. Are you interested in gardening? The woman asked. I'm learning, Megan admitted. We have some space at home, but I'm still figuring out what grows well in this climate. The secret is starting small and really paying attention to what works, the woman advised. Don't try to plant everything at once. Pick a few things you really want to eat, learn how they grow, then expand from there. As they talked, Doria selected a variety of vegetables and fruits, building a collection that would provide the foundation for several meals. She chose ingredients that would allow her to cook for her family, something she hadn't been able to do since before the interview aired. Through the windows of the farmhouse, she could see Harry attempting to keep Archie entertained without waking him fully, while Lilibet watched the interaction with the alert expression of a baby who was taking in everything around her. The scene struck her as perfectly ordinary and therefore precious. Your grandson is beautiful, the farm woman commented, having noticed the family in the car. How old is he? 2.5, Megan answered. And the baby is 4 months. Wonderful ages, the woman said with the authority of someone who had raised children of her own. Exhausting, but wonderful. I remember when my kids were small, feeling like I needed to be 3 people at once. The casual comment resonated with Megan more than the woman could have known. The challenge of balancing motherhood with public scrutiny, family protection with personal authenticity, had been weighing on her heavily. Hearing someone acknowledge the inherent difficulty of parenting young children, without any reference to her particular circumstances, felt oddly comforting. As they concluded their shopping, the woman insisted on adding a small bouquet of sunflowers to their purchases. For the children, she said, kids should always have flowers around. Back at the car, Archie had awakened and was engaging in animated conversation with his father about a butterfly he had spotted through the window. His grandfather's voice carried the particular tone that adults use when fully engaged with a child's observations, treating each comment as genuinely important. Did you see the butterfly, Mama? Archie called out as Megan approached with their bags of produce. I missed it, but you can tell me all about it, she replied, loading their purchases into the back of the car. As they settled back into their seats and prepared to continue their drive, Doria suggested one more stop. There's a little beach access point about 10 minutes from here. It's not marked, so tourists don't usually find it. Would you like to see the ocean up close? The idea appealed to everyone. Archie had been asking about the beach for weeks, but their usual spots had been problematic due to photographer presence. A hidden access point sounded perfect. The road to the beach was barely more than a wide dirt path, winding through coastal sage scrub and ice plant. As they descended toward the water, the sound of waves grew stronger, mixing with the cries of seagulls and the occasional bark of sea lions. The beach, when they reached it, was a small crescent of sand tucked between rocky outcroppings. A few other visitors were scattered along the shoreline, families with children and couples walking hand in hand, but the space felt private and peaceful. Harry carried Lilibet while Megan helped Archie navigate the uneven path down to the sand. Doria followed with a blanket and the water bottles, moving with the sure-footed confidence of someone who had made this walk before. The sand was warm but not hot, perfect for barefoot exploration. Archie immediately began collecting shells and interesting rocks, creating a small pile that he guarded jealously from the advances of a curious seagull. The water's quite warm, Harry observed, having tested it with one hand while keeping a secure hold on Lilibet. This part of the coast is protected from the worst of the cold currents, Doria explained. It's one of the reasons the Spanish explorers chose to settle here originally. Megan had rolled up her pants and was walking along the water's edge, letting the waves wash over her feet. For the first time in weeks, her posture looked truly relaxed, her shoulders dropping away from her ears as the rhythmic sound of the ocean worked its therapeutic magic. "This is exactly what we needed," she called back to the others. "I feel like I can breathe again." Harry joined her at the water's edge, Lilibet secure in his arms. The baby seemed fascinated by the movement of the waves and the sound of the water, her dark eyes tracking the foam as it rushed up the beach and receded. "She likes it," he observed, noting his daughter's alert expression. "The sound is probably comforting to her," Doria suggested, settling onto the blanket with Archie's growing collection of beach treasures. Rhythmic, like a heartbeat or breathing. They spent the next hour in simple beach activities that felt revolutionary in their normalcy. Archie built an elaborate sand castle with help from his grandmother, while his parents walked the shoreline, and let their conversation flow naturally from topic to topic. For the first time since the interview aired, they talked about things other than media strategy and public response. They discussed Archie's language development, Lilibet's sleep patterns, plans for the garden at home, and whether they should consider getting a family dog. "What kind of dog would you want?" Megan asked, pausing to examine a particularly beautiful shell that had washed up at her feet. "Something good with children," Harry replied immediately. "Maybe a golden retriever or a lab, something active enough to keep up with Archie, but gentle enough to be safe around Lily." "I had a rescue mutt growing up," Megan said, smiling at the memory. "Best dog in the world. Smart, loyal, protective when he needed to be, but generally just happy to be part of the family." The conversation meandered from dogs to childhood pets to favorite family traditions, the kind of getting-to-know-you discussion that couples often had before children but rarely found time for afterward. The beach setting and the absence of external pressures created space for rediscovering each other beyond their roles as parents and public figures. Doria watched them from her position on the blanket, noting how the ocean air and unstructured time were working their magic. Archie had found a piece of driftwood that he was convinced looked like a dinosaur, and he was regaling her with elaborate stories about its prehistoric adventures. "Tell me about the dinosaur's family," she encouraged, genuinely interested in his creative narrative. "The mommy dinosaur and daddy dinosaur lived in a castle," Archie explained seriously. "And they had a baby dinosaur who was very little, like Lily." The innocent parallel between his story and his own family situation wasn't lost on any of the adults, but they let him continue his tale without interruption. Children's stories often revealed their understanding of the world in ways that direct questions never could. As the afternoon progressed, the beach began to empty as families headed home for dinner and evening routines. The Sussex family found themselves essentially alone on the small crescent of sand, with only the ocean and the seabirds for company. "We should probably think about heading back," Harry said reluctantly, checking the time on his phone. "Just a few more minutes," Archie pleaded, the universal cry of children who were having too much fun to contemplate leaving. "5 more minutes," Megan agreed, settling beside Doria on the blanket while Harry continued his patrol of the waterline with Lilibet. "Thank you for today," Megan said quietly, so her voice wouldn't carry to her son. "I didn't realize how much we needed this until we were actually doing it." Doria reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Sometimes the best medicine is the simplest. Fresh air, family time, and remembering that the world is bigger than whatever crisis feels overwhelming at the moment." "It's easy to forget that when you're in the middle of it," Megan admitted. "Everything feels so intense, so important, so urgent. But sitting here, watching Archie play and Harry walking with Lily, it puts things in perspective. The important things are usually the quiet things," Doria observed. "The moments that don't make headlines, but make life worth living." As they prepared to leave the beach, each member of the family carried something with them beyond their original belongings. Archie had his collection of shells and rocks, carefully sorted and counted. Lilibet had her first real beach experience, something that would remain in family stories long after she could remember it herself. Harry and Megan had reconnected with a sense of possibility that had been buried under weeks of stress and reactive decision-making. And Doria had the satisfaction of seeing her family remember how to simply be together without agenda or performance. The drive back to Montecito would take them through different neighborhoods, past different views, with different conversations. But the foundation for those experiences had been laid during their simple morning and afternoon of rediscovering the pleasure of unplanned time together. As they loaded the car with sandy children and beach treasures, the sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that would make the evening drive a fitting conclusion to an unexpectedly perfect day. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of the Montecito estate as Doria Ragland stepped out of her Toyota Prius. She had driven the familiar route from Los Angeles countless times, but today felt different. The weight of recent events hung in the air like the coastal fog that often blanketed Santa Barbara in the early hours. Megan appeared at the front door before Doria could knock, her face lighting up with genuine relief. The two women embraced wordlessly, holding each other a moment longer than usual. Behind Megan, Harry emerged with Archie balanced on his hip, the toddler's face brightening at the sight of his grandmother. "Grandma Doria," Archie squealed, reaching out with both arms. Doria scooped him up, spinning him around as his giggles filled the morning air. For a moment, the tension that had been building for weeks seemed to dissolve. Harry kissed Doria's cheek, his gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "We really needed this." Inside the house, baby Lilibet slept peacefully in her carrier, oblivious to the storm that had been raging around her family. Doria peered down at her newest granddaughter, marveling at how much she had grown since her last visit just 3 weeks ago. The three adults moved to the kitchen, where coffee was already brewing. Megan poured 3 cups, while Harry kept Archie entertained with wooden blocks on the floor nearby. The domestic scene felt almost normal, but Doria could sense the undercurrent of exhaustion in both her daughter and son-in-law. "How are you both holding up?" Doria asked, settling into one of the breakfast nook chairs. Megan and Harry exchanged a look that spoke volumes. The past month had been particularly challenging. The interview with Oprah had aired to massive global attention, generating more headlines and commentary than they had anticipated. While many had praised their courage in speaking their truth, the response from certain quarters had been swift and harsh. "Some days are better than others," Megan admitted, cradling her coffee cup between her palms. "The support has been overwhelming, but so has the criticism." Harry nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "We knew there would be pushback, but experiencing it is different than preparing for it." Doria had watched the interview from her home in Los Angeles, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's composure and honesty. She had also seen the immediate aftermath, the flood of news coverage, social media commentary, and opinion pieces that followed. As a social worker and yoga instructor, she understood the importance of processing difficult experiences, but she also knew when her family needed space to breathe. "Have you been getting out much?" she asked, noting the pale cast to both their faces. "Not really," Harry admitted. "We've been staying close to home, focusing on the children." Doria set down her coffee cup with quiet determination. "Then, today we're going for a drive." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Mom, I don't think that's such a good idea. The photographers have been camped out at various spots around town." "Which is exactly why we need to reclaim your freedom of movement," Doria replied firmly. "You can't become prisoners in your own home. Besides, I've been driving these roads for months now. I know which routes are quieter." Harry considered this, his protective instincts warring with his recognition that isolation wasn't healthy for any of them. "Where were you thinking?" Doria smiled, the expression transforming her face. "Remember that little coastal road you showed me last time? The one that winds through the hills? It's beautiful, peaceful, and, most importantly, it's not on any tourist maps." The idea took root slowly. Archie had been cooped up in the house for days, his usual playground visits curtailed by security concerns. Lilibet would sleep just as peacefully in her car seat as she would in her crib. And both Harry and Megan looked like they desperately needed fresh air and a change of scenery. "We could pack a lunch," Megan said tentatively, warming to the idea. "Make it a proper family outing." "I'll drive," Doria offered. "My car is less recognizable than yours." Within an hour, they had organized themselves with military precision. Lilibet's diaper bag was packed with enough supplies for a small expedition. Archie's favorite snacks were distributed between various pockets and compartments. Harry loaded a cooler with sandwiches, fruit, and drinks while Meghan gathered blankets and toys. The security team had initially expressed concerns about the spontaneous nature of the outing, but after reviewing Doria's proposed route and confirming that no major events or media gatherings were scheduled in the area, they gave their approval with the usual protocols in place. As they settled into Doria's Prius, the family dynamic shifted into something more relaxed. Harry folded his long frame into the front passenger seat, while Meghan sat in the back between the two car seats. Archie immediately began pointing out every car, bird, and cloud he could see through his window. Doria pulled out of the driveway slowly, taking the back exit that led to a smaller residential street. The morning traffic was light, and within minutes they were cruising through the quiet neighborhoods that surrounded their Montecito enclave. "This feels amazing," Meghan said, rolling down her window slightly to let the fresh air flow through the car. "I forgot how much I missed just being able to go somewhere without a whole production." Harry reached back to squeeze her hand. "We should do this more often. Once things settle down," she replied, but her voice carried hope rather than resignation. Doria caught her daughter's eye in the rearview mirror. "Things don't always settle down on their own, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to create your own calm." They drove through residential streets lined with Spanish-style homes and pristine gardens. The architecture told the story of California's complex history, from Spanish colonial influences to modern interpretations of Mediterranean design. Archie provided running commentary on everything he saw, his observations switching between English and the few Spanish words Doria had been teaching him. "Abuela, look. Big dog," he called out, spotting a golden retriever being walked by an elderly man in a sun hat. "I see him, Mijo," Doria replied, using the Spanish term of endearment that had become his favorite. "What color is the dog?" "Yellow, like the sun." Harry chuckled, the sound more genuine than any laugh Doria had heard from him in weeks. She had noticed how the constant scrutiny had worn on him, the way his shoulders carried tension even during quiet moments at home. Today, driving through the peaceful streets with his family, some of that burden seemed to lift. As they approached the turnoff for the coastal road, Doria slowed the car and pointed toward a small roadside stand selling fresh flowers and local produce. "Should we stop and get something for the house?" Meghan looked around cautiously, but the area was deserted except for the elderly woman tending the stand and a few customers browsing the offerings. "Actually, that sounds lovely." They pulled into the small gravel parking area, and Harry got out first, scanning the surroundings with the automatic awareness that had become second nature. Seeing nothing concerning, he opened Meghan's door while Doria came around to help with Archie. The flower stand was a riot of color, with sunflowers, lavender, and roses arranged in simple buckets. The proprietor, a woman in her 70s with soil-stained hands and a warm smile, greeted them like old friends. "Beautiful morning for a drive," she said, apparently unrecognizing them or simply choosing not to acknowledge their public profiles. "These sunflowers just came in from the farm this morning." Meghan gravitated toward a bucket of mixed wildflowers, their simple beauty appealing to her after weeks of feeling like every aspect of her life was being analyzed and critiqued. "These are gorgeous. My granddaughter picked those herself," the woman said proudly. "She's got an eye for color, that one." Harry selected a small potted lavender plant, while Archie became fascinated with a display of smooth river rocks that had been painted with simple designs. The woman noticed his interest and knelt down to his level. "Would you like to pick out a special rock?" she asked kindly. "I paint them myself." Archie studied the selection with the seriousness of an art critic before choosing one painted to look like a ladybug. "For Lily," he announced, proud of his consideration for his baby sister. The transaction was simple and anonymous, the kind of normal interaction that had become precious in its rarity. As they loaded their purchases into the car, Doria noticed how the brief stop had shifted everyone's mood. Even Lilibet seemed more alert, her dark eyes taking in the new surroundings with quiet curiosity. Back on the road, they began the gentle climb into the hills above Santa Barbara. The landscape changed from manicured suburban perfection to something wilder and more natural. Oak trees dotted the golden hillsides, and, in the distance, The Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon like a blue-green promise. "I love this drive," Harry said, his voice carrying a contentment that had been absent for too long. "It reminds me of some of the countryside back home." "Which parts?" Doria asked, genuinely curious. Despite all the media coverage, she realized there were still many details about Harry's life before America that she didn't know. "The Cotswolds, mostly. There's something about the way the hills roll, the quality of the light. Obviously, the climate is completely different, but the sense of space is similar." Meghan turned to look at him. "Do you miss it?" "The countryside, I mean." Harry was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I miss certain aspects of it. The footpaths, the pubs, the way you can walk for miles without seeing another soul. But I don't miss feeling trapped there." The honesty of his answer hung in the air for a moment before Archie broke the mood by announcing loudly that he could see fishies in a small pond they were passing. The pond was actually a swimming pool, but his enthusiasm was infectious. As they crested a small hill, the full expanse of the Santa Barbara coastline spread out before them. The city looked peaceful from this vantage point, its red-tiled roofs and palm trees creating a postcard-perfect scene. In the harbor, sailboats bobbed at their moorings while a few larger vessels moved slowly across the water. "It's beautiful," Meghan murmured, as if seeing it for the first time. "It really is," Doria agreed. "Sometimes we get so caught up in everything else that we forget to notice what's right in front of us." The comment carried deeper meaning, and all three adults understood it. The past month had been consumed with reactions to their interview, legal considerations, and strategic planning for their future. The simple act of driving through beautiful scenery with family had been pushed aside in favor of more pressing concerns. Doria pulled into a scenic overlook that she had discovered during one of her solo explorations of the area. A few picnic tables were scattered around the small parking area, and a well-maintained trail led to an even better viewpoint about 100 yards away. "Should we stretch our legs?" she suggested. Harry checked his phone for any urgent messages while Meghan gathered the diaper bag and Archie's water bottle. Lilibet had fallen asleep during the drive, her tiny fist curled against her cheek in the perfect image of peaceful innocence. The overlook offered a panoramic view of the coast, from Point Conception in the north to the Channel Islands visible on the southern horizon. A gentle breeze carried the salt tang of the ocean mixed with the warm scent of chaparral and sage. Archie immediately became fascinated with a ground squirrel that had emerged from the rocks near the trail, chattering at them in apparent annoyance at having his territory invaded. Harry kept one eye on his son while scanning the horizon with the other, his security training never fully dormant even in peaceful moments like this. "Look at that," Meghan said, pointing to a small pod of dolphins visible in the water far below. "They're so graceful." Doria followed her gaze, watching the dark shapes move through the water with effortless coordination. "Your great-grandmother used to tell me that dolphins were good luck," she said to Archie, who had abandoned the squirrel to join the dolphin watching. "What kind of good luck?" Meghan asked, settling onto a bench with Lilibet still sleeping in her arms. "She said they appeared when families needed protection, when they were starting new chapters in their lives." Doria smiled at the memory. Of course, she also said that about rainbows, shooting stars, and finding pennies on the sidewalk. Harry laughed quietly. Sounds like she believed in covering all her bases. She believed in hope, Doria corrected gently, and in looking for signs that things would work out. The conversation might have continued, but Archie chose that moment to discover that the overlook had an echo if you shouted loudly enough. His delighted hello bounced off the hills and came back to him, causing him to dissolve into giggles and attempt increasingly elaborate vocalizations. As they watched him experiment with the acoustics of the hillside, the three adults fell into comfortable silence. The stress of recent weeks hadn't disappeared, but it had retreated enough to allow space for this moment of simple family joy. Lilibet stirred in Meghan's arms, her dark eyes opening to take in the unfamiliar surroundings. Rather than crying at finding herself somewhere new, she seemed curious, her gaze moving from face to face before settling on the vast sky above. "She's such a calm baby," Doria observed. "Even with all the chaos of the past month, she just adapts." "She gets that from her mom," Harry said, reaching over to stroke his daughter's cheek with one gentle finger. Meghan shifted Lilibet to her other arm, preparing to nurse her before they continued their drive. I don't feel very adaptable these days. I feel like I'm constantly reacting to things instead of choosing my own path. That's temporary, Doria said with quiet conviction. You've always been someone who finds her way back to center. This situation is bigger than anything you've faced before, but you're still you. The simple statement carried the weight of a lifetime of watching her daughter navigate challenges, from childhood disappointments to professional setbacks to the unprecedented circumstances that had brought them all to this hillside overlooking the Pacific. As Megan settled into nursing Lilibet, Harry corralled Archie back from his acoustic experiments and helped him drink some water. The family dynamic felt natural here, away from the pressures and expectations that had been building around them. We should probably head back soon, Harry said, checking the time. Lunchtime is approaching, and someone gets cranky when his schedule gets too disrupted. 5 more minutes, Archie negotiated, having overheard the comment. 5 more minutes, Doria agreed, settling back to enjoy the view and the company a little longer. The dolphins had disappeared, but a pelican soared past at eye level, riding the thermal currents with prehistoric grace. Above them, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily, scanning the hillside for movement. The natural world continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human dramas and complications. As they prepared to return to the car, each family member carried a sense of renewal that had been missing for weeks. The drive had served its purpose already, providing space to breathe and remember what mattered most. But it was only the beginning of what would prove to be a day of unexpected discoveries and quiet revelations.